Two men swapped wives. For a day, the switch begins. The sun beat down on the small suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Grove, where picket fences gleamed and flower beds were trimmed like they were in a competition. It was a Saturday in early spring, and the air smelled like grilled burgers, fresh grass, and distant blooming jasmine. Kids shrieked in the distance, chasing each other with water guns, while the adults gathered around Mark's backyard patio for the neighborhood's first barbecue of the season. Mark Taylor was the kind of man you'd miss in a crowd, not because he wasn't kind or honest or even good looking, but because he didn't demand attention. His wife, Emma, was equally understated, with a gentle voice and a way of making anyone feel safe. They had been married for 12 years, had 2 kids, and lived a life so calm it often felt like a breeze. Then there was Jake Foster. Jake was loud, confident, and flashy. He had made his fortune selling real estate before the age of 35, and wasn't shy about it. His wife, Vanessa, was glamorous and high maintenance, the kind of woman who looked effortlessly flawless even when taking out the trash. Their house next door had mood lighting on the driveway, a sauna in the garage, and an espresso machine that cost more than most used cars. The two couples had always been friendly, but never close. That changed when the barbecue ran out of beer. Mark and Jake were sitting near the grill, watching the flames flicker while sipping the last 2 bottles. Jake said, cracking his knuckles. Sometimes I wonder what it's like. What's like? Mark asked, distracted by a group of kids tugging on the garden hose. Jake smirked. Living your life. Your simplicity. Emma cooks you. Work. Your kids draw crayon dragons on the walls and you two still hold hands at the grocery store. It's like a 90s sitcom. Mark gave a soft chuckle. And sometimes I wonder what it's like not worrying if the power bill will break the budget. Jake leaned in, lowering his voice. Hear me out. Just for a day. You take Vanessa, I'll take Emma, just to see the difference. No funny stuff. No weird lines crossed. Just life. For a day. Mark froze. You're joking? Dead serious. Come on. It's harmless. We don't touch. We don't snoop. Just swap environments. One day, if nothing else, we'll appreciate what we have more. It was absurd. It was wildly inappropriate. It was completely insane. And yet some dark part of Mark, the tired, overlooked, routine swallow part, was curious. Could stepping into someone else's world really shift your own? Jake saw the hesitation and grinned. You game? Mark looked over at Emma, still laughing, with Sarah from down the street. He turned back. If she agrees, and if we make it clear this is just an experiment. Later that evening, Emma sat beside Mark on their porch swing. The stars were peeking out, and fireflies blinked lazily in the bushes. You want to what? She asked, setting down her tea. Just a day. Jake and I, we were talking. He wants to experience life without all the noise. I guess I was curious too. Emma didn't respond at first. Then she smiled softly. You always say I'm too agreeable. Maybe it's time we both shook things up. And that's how the next morning, Emma kissed Mark goodbye, not in her own kitchen, but in Jake's. Jake's house was spotless, echoey, and too quiet. The fridge was stocked with expensive cheeses, sparkling water, and zero actual food. The walls were adorned with modern art Emma didn't understand. Even the air smelled designer. Jake greeted her wearing a robe and holding a smoothie. Good morning, pseudo-wife. I made you a kale ginger detox bomb. It tastes like lawn. Emma laughed nervously. Thanks, I guess. Today, he said, handing her a remote with confidence. We live like kings and queens. Meanwhile, at the Taylor's house, Vanessa stood in the middle of the living room, looking mildly horrified. The coffee table had a Lego castle half built on it. A dog was sleeping on the couch. Mark handed her a cup of drip coffee. No oat milk? She asked. We have skim. She blinked. The day unfolded awkwardly. Jake insisted on showing Emma his morning. Routine. 20 minutes of affirmations in the mirror, followed by a run on his $6,000 treadmill while watching motivational TED Talks. Emma followed, bemused, sipping her leafy green smoothie like a polite hostage. Jake talked about energy and hustle and visualization. Emma listened, occasionally offering quiet wisdom. You ever just be without planning? He paused. Being still feels like failing. At the Taylor home, Vanessa was discovering the alien concept of chores. Mark had a list. Laundry, vacuuming, prepping dinner. Vanessa offered to call a cleaning service. Mark smiled. "We do it ourselves here," she huffed, but tried. Folding shirts, she stumbled upon one of Emma's journals in the laundry basket. She resisted opening it, then gave in. Inside were quotes, prayers, and entries about the kids, dreams, fears, and even a line that read, "I wish Mark would see that his tired smile still lights up the whole room." Vanessa's throat tightened. Late afternoon, things shifted. Jake sat across from Emma at a rooftop cafe. He had brought her here to impress. Expensive menu, city skyline. But all she cared about was the look on his face. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Shoot. Do you even like your life? Or do you just like that other people think it looks good?" He froze. The question cut through his facade like a scalpel. "I don't know," he admitted. "I think I've forgotten what liking anything really means." At home, Vanessa and Mark were peeling carrots for dinner. She had stopped complaining. There was music playing, Emma's favorite old playlist. Vanessa asked, "How do you two stay so close?" Mark paused. "We choose to every day, even when it's hard, even when it's boring." "And that works?" He smiled. "It's not about it working. It's about it mattering." By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, each participant of the great swap sat in quiet reflection. Jake dropped Emma off at her front porch and whispered, "Your husband is a lucky man." Emma smiled. "You should try being lucky too. Not rich, not envied, just grateful." Vanessa walked home, shoes in hand, and said nothing to Jake when he opened the door. Just kissed his cheek softly, as if remembering something she hadn't felt in years. Mark held Emma close that night. No words, just closeness. Neither couple was the same again. A day in their new lives. The sun rose over the suburban neighborhood with a deceptive calm. While the world outside continued with its usual rhythm, inside two homes, chaos and confusion were about to take center stage. The previous day's impulsive decision had cast a long shadow, and the morning was about to show both men what they had truly gotten themselves into. Scene 1. James' house with Olivia James. Now sharing his home with Olivia, his best friend Daniel's wife woke up with a stiff back and an unsettling feeling. The couch had not been kind. Olivia had insisted on separate sleeping arrangements, which, although respectful, highlighted the surreal nature of the entire arrangement. He shuffled to the kitchen, groggy and half hoping he'd wake up from a strange dream. Instead, he was greeted by the scent of freshly brewed coffee and an immaculately set breakfast table. "Good morning," Olivia said, not looking up from her tablet. She wore a smart robe, her hair tied in a flawless bun. "I figured it would be nice to start the day like civilized adults. I've also made a chore schedule. We'll keep things orderly, James." I blinked. He wasn't used to this level of order. His real wife, Eliza, had a more relaxed approach to mornings, sometimes too relaxed. He sat down and picked at the eggs, unsure how to feel. "You okay?" Olivia asked, finally meeting his eyes. "Yeah, it's just weird. You're a lot like I imagined." "Imagine? I mean, you always seem so put together. Now, living here with you is like, I get why Daniel always looked polished." She smirked slightly. "And yet he always left his socks in the fridge. Go figure." They both chuckled, a rare, genuine moment of humor amidst the absurdity. Daniel's house with Eliza. Meanwhile, Daniel's experience was different. He'd awoken to the sounds of loud music echoing through the house. When he stumbled into the kitchen, he found Eliza dancing in pajama shorts and a hoodie, spatula in one hand, phone in the other. "Morning, roommate. Hope you like chocolate chip pancakes." She beamed. Daniel rubbed his temples. "It's 6:45. Exactly. Early birds and worms or whatever. Want some juice?" He nodded absently, scanning the mess around him. Flour on the counters, syrup dripping onto the floor, a blender humming with no apparent purpose. Chaos. "So this is what James lives with every day?" he muttered. "You say that like it's a bad thing," Eliza said playfully, sliding a plate toward him. "We're all a bit of a mess sometimes, but that's life." As he took a bite, he was surprised by how good it tasted. Despite the whirlwind energy, there was something comforting about Eliza's presence. Spontaneous, unpredictable, alive. The workplace shock later that day. James arrived. At work with Olivia accompanying him. It was agreed she'd observe his daily routine to understand how differently they lived. She carried a sleek notepad, taking notes like a corporate analyst. "Your desk," is interesting, she observed, eyeing the clutter of coffee cups scattered. Files and a half-eaten protein bar. James scratched his head. Organized chaos. I always find what I need. By lunchtime, his co-workers were whispering. Who's the new girl James traded up? One muttered. James felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't thought about how this would look. Olivia, ever composed, offered a diplomatic smile, but kept her distance. Meanwhile, Daniel had taken Eliza to his gym. He assumed it would be a controlled environment. Instead, Eliza had struck up conversations with strangers, joined an impromptu Zumba class, and accidentally knocked over a protein shake display. Nothing does. You always bring this kind of storm with you, he asked, half laughing, half panicking. Only where it's needed, she said with a wink. Dinner differences. Dinner time revealed the true cracks. James came home to find Olivia plating a 4-course meal complete with candles and soft jazz. It was elegant, impeccable, and tense. I hope this meets your expectations, she said, sitting across from him. It's incredible, James replied. But you didn't have to go all out. I always go all out. I believe in effort. It sounded like a jab. James swallowed and nodded. Halfway through dinner, he realized how silent their conversations were compared to the easygoing, sometimes silly talks he had with Eliza. Meanwhile, at Daniel's house, he returned from a quick store. Run to find Eliza watching cartoons with a bowl of cereal. I thought we were making lasagna. I got distracted by this show. But hey, we can make it together now. Daniel groaned but joined her in the kitchen. The meal took 2 hours, half of which was filled with laughter, spilled sauce, and a flour fight. The lasagna burned, but the experience, oddly perfect. The night. Talk later that night. Both couples, now roommates, sat down separately for their own talks. You miss her, don't you? Olivia asked James. He nodded slowly. I thought maybe I needed something more. But today showed me that more doesn't always mean better. Olivia softened. You know, Daniel said the same thing before, that he wondered if something was missing, but I think we forget the value of what we have when we don't. Nurture it. Back at Daniel's place, he and Eliza sat on the porch. You know, Eliza said, I always thought Daniel was the definition of control and balance, but I never realized how rigid that could feel. Daniel replied, and I thought James was unmotivated. But now I see maybe he just prioritized differently. They looked at each other. For the first time that day, there was mutual understanding. The realization, as midnight struck, both James and Daniel stared at the ceiling in their respective homes, wondering how things had spiraled so wildly. This day had not just been an experiment, it was a mirror. And what they saw in it was both illuminating and uncomfortable. They had traded lives thinking it would validate their doubts about their wives. Instead, it had only exposed their own shortcomings. A decision loomed, one that could not be undone lightly. Tomorrow, the conversation would begin. But for tonight, the weight of realization lay heavy in the silence of unfamiliar beds, shattered reflections, and second thoughts. The day after the wife swap was supposed to be the climax of amusement and curiosity. Instead, it began under an invisible cloud of discomfort. For all the laughter and surprises of the previous day, a quiet tension had started to build, growing roots in the hearts of everyone involved. A morning of mixed messages. James woke up again on the couch, his body protesting and his mind spinning. He heard the familiar hum of Olivia in the kitchen. This time, instead of the sterile order of the day before, she was humming softly, stirring something over the stove. The jazz was gone. There was no chore chart, just warmth? Coffee? She asked when she saw him. Yeah, thanks. He looked around. You're not doing the schedule thing today. She gave a wry smile. I realized I might have gone overboard yesterday. I just wanted to show I was capable, but maybe I was trying too hard to prove something. James hesitated. You were right, though, about effort. I think Eliza and I just got too comfortable or lazy, and Daniel and I were too structured. Too much rigidity can suffocate affection. They locked eyes for a moment. Two strangers who had lived with each other for less than 48 hours but already saw too much in each other's reflections. Eliza breaks the mold. Meanwhile, Eliza had woken up early, a shock even to herself. She tiptoed through Daniel's house and for once didn't turn on the TV or blast music. She quietly cleaned up the cereal bowls from last night and put on a playlist of instrumental piano. Daniel entered, rubbing his eyes. What's this? Did Someone kidnap Eliza and replace her with a classical violinist? She chuckled. I just figured you might appreciate a calm morning for once. I think I've been a bit much. He shook his head. You've been yourself. Honestly, I needed it. I didn't realize how much pressure I put on everyone to meet my standards. They shared a silent breakfast, broken only by the sounds of forks against plates. It was the most peaceful morning Daniel had experienced in years. An awkward encounter. Later that day, both couples accidentally ran into each other at the same park. James and Olivia were walking along the trail when they saw Eliza and Daniel jogging from the other side. The moment was awkward. Four people who had upended their lives with a handshake and a dare now standing under the glaring sun, unsure what to say. Hey! James finally broke the silence. Hey! Eliza responded, wiping her forehead. How's it going? Olivia asked Daniel. There was a long pause. Daniel looked at James, then at Eliza. Can we talk? All of us? They found an empty picnic on a table under a tree. The air was tense but not hostile. James cleared his throat. We were stupid. Eliza nodded. Reckless, more like. Daniel added, but maybe it was the wake-up call we needed. At least for me. They all nodded, each lost in their own sea of thoughts. Olivia finally said, we keep treating our relationships like products, as if we can upgrade or exchange them. But love isn't retail. Eliza leaned forward. You know, for all my spontaneity, I realized I hate being treated like a passing thrill. And James, he started doing that. Like I was just a fun, careless one. James looked ashamed. I did. I was looking for something you already had, just buried under laundry and routine. And I, Daniel said, kept chasing perfection until I couldn't recognize the joy in the imperfect. They sat in silence again, an unexpected confession. Later that evening, Daniel and James met privately at their favorite old bar. The place smelled like wood and stale beer, a comforting reminder of simpler times. You know, Daniel started, I envied you. James looked surprised. Why? You always seemed free, relaxed, like you were living life instead of calculating it. James laughed bitterly. And I envied you. The suit, the order, the respect. You always looked like you had it. Figured out. Neither of us did. Nope, they raised their glasses. A silent truce. Daniel hesitated. Do you want her back? James's face softened. Yes, but only if she wants me back. I need to earn it. Daniel nodded. Same here. At a turning point back at their respective homes, Eliza and Olivia also sat down for a long overdue heart-to-heart. You know, Eliza, babe, I used to think Daniel didn't appreciate me because I wasn't enough. You are enough, Olivia said gently. Sometimes we just forget to say it or show it. Olivia looked down at her hands. Daniel and I used to be playful. Then life happened. Schedules, promotions. I traded connection for productivity. Eliza smiled. Maybe it's time we all find a better middle, a message from the heart. The next morning, both couples received letters, not texts, not emails. Handwritten letters left on kitchen tables from James to Eliza. Eliza, I miss your laughter more than I ever thought I would. Not just the sound, but what it meant. I miss your fire, your randomness, your way of making boring things feel like a movie scene. I tried to trade you for structure, but all I found was how empty life is without your chaos. If you'll have me, I want to start over. Not perfect, but present. James from Daniel to Olivia. Olivia, I see you now, really see you. Not just the polished wife in the pretty photos, but the woman who makes a house into a haven. The woman who has been patient far longer than I deserved. I spent too long shaping our life like a blueprint. I forgot that love grows in the spaces between the lines. I'm sorry. And I want to try again, and this time together, Daniel, the responses would come later. For now, the letters hung heavy in the air, brimming with possibility. Crossroads of the heart. The days that followed were not filled with instant reunions or fairy tale endings. If anything, the letters opened doors that had long been sealed shut, but stepping through them required courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront truths that had gone unspoken for far too long. Eliza's retreat, Eliza, didn't respond to James's letter immediately. Instead, she packed a small bag, left a note that simply said, I need to think. She drove to her sister's lake house 2 hours away, a quiet cabin nestled between mist-covered water and whispering pines. No phone, no distractions, just space. She sat by the dock, dipping her feet into the cold water. James's letter folded in her lap. The words played on a loop in her head. I miss your fire. Not perfect, but present. Those words stung, not because they were false, but because they were late. She had waited so long for James to see her, not just as his wife, but as his equal partner, his co-dreamer, his muse. Had it taken living with another woman for him to remember? She closed her eyes and asked the water a question she had never dared to voice aloud. Do I still want him? And the answer didn't come easy. Olivia's doubt back at her house. Olivia held Daniel's letter like a relic. She had read it 3 times, each reading pulling on a different heartstring. The poetic sincerity, the vulnerability in his handwriting, it reminded her of the young man she fell in love with, not the CEO she had learned to accommodate. But sincerity was only part of the equation. She wasn't sure if she could trust that change was possible. Olivia met with her therapist, something she hadn't done in months. Sitting in the soft chair, she admitted, I don't know if I still want the same things, or if I ever did. The therapist nodded slowly. What are you afraid of? That I'll forgive him and end up back where we started, appreciated but never truly known. The double dinner date on the weekend, Daniel suggested a strange but bold idea, a dinner, all 4 of them together. It felt risky, like walking barefoot across broken glass. But Olivia agreed. Eliza returned from the lake that same morning, not offering any explanations, only a quiet, let's just see. They chose a small, neutral restaurant. One with low lighting, cozy booths, and an unspoken hush that encouraged real conversation. They didn't toast. They didn't pretend. Instead, they talked. Daniel opened the floor. I suggested this because this whole thing started as an experiment, but I think it's ending as a reckoning. James leaned forward. I know I failed Eliza in more ways than I realized. I thought I needed a different kind of wife. But what I really needed was to show up for the one I already had. Olivia, arms crossed at first, finally unfolded. Daniel, I read your letter, and it meant something, but words don't outweigh years. I need more than poetry. I need presence, patience. I need to be pursued, not managed. Eliza looked at James, her voice quieter. I loved you even when you made everything a joke. I laughed because I believed in us. But when you stopped taking me seriously, I forgot how to take myself seriously too. A deep silence followed, but it wasn't cold. It was honest. It was the sound of 4 people confronting the real aftermath of their choices. The breaking point. After dinner, they didn't go home together. Instead, they parted ways. That night, Olivia found herself journaling for the first time in years. Her entry wasn't about Daniel. It was about herself. I used to define love by how useful I could be to someone. But I think love should also feel like freedom, not duty. Maybe for the first time, I want to find out who I am without being someone's anchor. Daniel, on the other hand, stayed at the office. He looked out over the city from the top floor window, glass of whiskey untouched beside him. He whispered to the empty room, what if I lost her? And what if she's better off? Eliza slept restlessly, dreams haunted by laughter that had turned to silence. In the morning, she wrote James a message she didn't send yet. I believe. You mean it. I do. But I don't know if I want to go back. Maybe we both need to grow separately, and if we're lucky, we'll grow toward each other. 2 conversations that changed everything. The next morning, Olivia asked Daniel to go for a walk. They strolled through the botanical gardens surrounded by quiet beauty. I'm not saying no, Olivia began, but I'm not saying yes either. I need time, Daniel. I need to rediscover who I am. Without our routines, without your goals bleeding into mine. Daniel nodded. I'll wait. But not passively, I'll work on myself. For me, and if you find your way back, I'll be here. Meanwhile, Eliza asked James to meet her at the old theater they used to visit when they were dating. It was closed, under renovation, but the steps were enough. I think I still love you, she said, but I don't want the same marriage. I want a partnership. I want depth, not just fun. Can you give me that? James replied, voice cracking. I don't know. But I want to try. I want to build it with you, not around you. They sat in silence, hands brushing, not fully held, but not pulling away either. A new beginning or not weeks passed. Olivia signed up for an art residency in another city. Daniel didn't stop her. He helped her pack. Eliza and James started weekly counseling. Slowly, gently. They didn't move back in right away, but they met every Friday for dinner and conversation, with phones off and hearts open. The wife swap had started as a dare, a reckless game to test what they thought they were missing, but it had become something else entirely, a catalyst, a mirror, a fire that burned away illusions and left only the truth, scorched but real. And now, with the smoke clearing, 4 people stood on their own crossroads, not sure where they'd end up. But finally walking forward, the space between us months passed, not in a blur, but in waves, sometimes quiet, sometimes roaring, sometimes painfully still. The 4 lives that once collided in chaos had slowly, deliberately unraveled and reformed, but not as they were, not as they had been. The swap was over, but the consequences? Still unfolding. Olivia and Florence. Olivia stood in front of a massive canvas inside a sunlit studio in Florence, Italy. Her art residency, a dream she never would have dared before. Here, she didn't have to explain who she was. She didn't have to be Daniel's wife or the perfect planner. She could be just Olivia. She painted scenes from memory. One showed Daniel, back turned, gazing out a window. Another, an abstract whirl of color and shadow that she named marriage. Blueprint in ruins. But one piece remained unfinished. It was of her and Daniel seated at a dinner table, hands close, almost touching, eyes looking elsewhere. She stared at it often, wondering if she'd ever complete it, or if it was meant to remain unresolved. Letters from Daniel came once a week. No demands, no pressure, just pages of raw honesty. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I'm writing to keep you close, even if only in words, she replied sparingly. But every reply mattered, and yet Florence felt less like an escape and more like a compass. Olivia wasn't running from her life. She was finding the courage to choose it on her terms. Eliza's new voice back home. Eliza had started a podcast. It was called Halfway Here, a raw, sometimes messy, always authentic series about rediscovering identity in the middle of relationships, chaos, and expectations. Her voice resonated. Listeners poured in. Comments flooded with people saying things like, "You said what?" I never had words for. James was her biggest fan. They were not back together, not officially, but they met every Friday, like clockwork. They'd go for walks, talk about her episodes, or just sit in silence by the lake, letting the awkwardness melt into something softer. One night, James brought a small box. Eliza tensed. "It's not a ring," he chuckled nervously. "It's something else." She opened it. Inside was a tiny golden compass pendant. "You always help me find my way," James said. Now I want you to have your own." She looked up, eyes glassy. "That is not nothing, James." He smiled. "It's not everything either, but maybe it's something new." Daniel's transformation. Daniel had changed. Not overnight. Not magically, but steadily. He joined a local improv group. Olivia would have laughed at the idea. At first, he did it to step out of his comfort zone, but eventually he stayed because it reminded him how to fail joyfully, to let go. At work, he cut his hours, promoted a young, hungry VP to take over day-to-day tasks. He started mentoring instead of micromanaging, and with each step, he felt lighter. One afternoon, he received a parcel from Florence. Inside, a postcard, a painting of an open door. On the back, Olivia's handwriting. "Not ready yet, but I'm not gone either. Don't close the door." He stared at it for a long time, then placed it on his fridge. Not a promise, not closure, but a thread. The reunion dinner. It had been exactly 6 months since the experiment ended when Eliza suggested a dinner. All 4 of them, same restaurant, different table. This time, there were no awkward starts. They hugged. They smiled. Real smiles. The kind born from scars that had healed just enough to no longer sting. Daniel looked at James. "How's the counseling?" "Brutal," James laughed. "But good. I've learned more in 6 months than I did in 6 years of marriage." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "And have you learned to clean your desk yet?" James grinned. "Let's not push it." Eliza sipped her wine. I think I'm finally understanding that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. And being loved doesn't mean being edited. They clink glasses, not to us, not to forever, but to growth, to pause, to possibility. The choices ahead later that night, they stood outside under the stars. The city hummed around him, but the moment felt frozen. I'm leaving for Florence again in 2 weeks, Olivia said softly. But I might come back. Daniel nodded. I'll be here, not waiting, just living. With room for you if you return. Eliza turned to James. Do you think we'll make it back to each other? James took her hand. Maybe we're not going back. Maybe we're going somewhere we've never been, she smiled. Good. I'm tired of reruns. 4 paths, 1 story. And so the story didn't end with reunions or rings or dramatic makeups. It ended with choice, with people daring to admit their flaws, embrace their needs, and love themselves enough to stop pretending. Olivia continued painting in Florence, but returned every few months, not for Daniel, but for herself. Daniel built a quieter, more intentional life, one that had space for joy and failure, and maybe someday, Olivia again. James and Eliza eventually moved back in together, but as new versions of themselves, co-creating a life, not replicating an old one. They all stayed connected, not as broken couples trying to mend, but as people who had learned how to breathe outside the weight of expectation. They had swapped lives to escape, but in the end, they found their way home, not to each other, but to themselves, unfinished. Conversations time did not erase what had happened. Instead, it folded the events into memory like creases in a well-worn letter. Still legible, still alive, but softer now. Life moved forward, but beneath the surface, the impact of the wife swap lingered like an echo that refused to fade. It wasn't just about switching homes, partners, or habits. It had been about identity, control, desire, regret, and the parts of themselves they had all long abandoned. The retreat had started with an idea from Eliza. A weekend retreat. Not a reunion, at least not in the traditional sense. More like closure or clarity, or maybe just curiosity. She pitched it casually in a group text titled The Great Mistake Club. The others agreed, half jokingly. But when the weekend arrived, none of them backed out. The retreat was a quiet Airbnb cabin near the coast, glass windows, wooden floors, the sea visible from every room. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, like them. The first night they sat by a fire pit with blankets over their knees and mugs of too strong tea in their hands. So, what do we call this? Daniel asked. An intervention? James offered. A sequel, Olivia said softly. Eliza shook her head. No, this is just a conversation we didn't finish. Months ago, 4 fireside confessions. As the fire cracked, so did the surface. Olivia was the first to speak. I spent so long trying to be perfect. For Daniel, for society, for this impossible version of myself I thought was worthy of love. But being away, Florence painting, the solitude, it showed me I don't have to earn peace. I can choose it. Daniel looked at her, emotion flickering in his eyes. I didn't need you to be perfect. I needed you to be honest. But I see now, I made it hard for you to be anything else. He turned to the group. I thought structure was strength. But maybe real strength is sitting in chaos and not flinching. That's something Eliza taught me. Eliza raised her mug. I flinched constantly. They all laughed, the tension breaking slightly. Then James spoke. I didn't know how to communicate. I thought being a good partner was just about showing up, doing stuff. But love isn't acts of service if there's no presence behind them. I was always physically there, but emotionally, I was miles away. Silence settled again, not heavy, just reflective. I used to think if you worked hard enough, you could fix anything, Eliza said. But some things aren't broken. They're just not finished yet. A night walk by the shore later, unable to sleep, James and Daniel took a walk down to the beach. The waves hit the shore with rhythmic certainty, a pattern neither of them had felt in their lives for a long time. You ever think we got lucky? Daniel asked. Lucky how? That it didn't ruin everything. James nodded slowly. Yeah, but I also think we got humbled, like the universe slapped us in the face and said, grow the hell up. Daniel chuckled. It's still weird. You were in my house with my wife, and I was in yours. And now we're back in our own lives, but completely different men. They stood in silence watching the tide roll in. Would you do it again? Daniel finally asked. No, James said, but I'm weirdly glad we did. Morning letters, hon. The final morning, Olivia left an envelope on the table for each of them. She didn't explain, just gave a quiet smile and walked to the deck, sipping her coffee. Inside James' letter, you taught me that softness can survive disorder. You taught me presence. Keep choosing it. Inside Eliza's, you reminded me that chaos isn't weakness, it's energy, untamed and alive. You showed me how to breathe. And for Daniel, you were never my enemy. Just a man who forgot how to listen. I'm still learning how to speak. When Daniel walked to her, holding his letter, he said, do I get to write back someday? Olivia nodded. Just don't mail it. Say it in person, if the time's right. New. Paths, clearer hearts weeks after the retreat, life resumed, but not in the same shapes. James and Eliza didn't rush back into labels. They created a shared calendar titled Intentional Days. It wasn't about milestones anymore. It was about rhythm, honesty, joy. Daniel flew to Florence for a week, not to win Olivia back, just to see her gallery opening. They walked the cobblestone streets like old friends who once tried love and found respect instead. Olivia's exhibition was titled The Space Between Us. One painting featured 4 chairs facing each other, all different, none empty. Eliza kept podcasting. Her most listened episode was titled The Year I Forgot Who I Was and the Month I Found Her Again. And though none of them had perfect endings, they had something better. Peace, perspective, presence. Letters in the attic. Years. Later, James and Eliza's daughter would find a box in their attic. Inside were notes, journal entries, postcards from Florence, a compass pendant, a podcast mic, and a folder labeled The Swap That Changed Everything. She would read and wonder and ask questions, and James would smile and say, it's not a story about marriage. It's a story about growing up at any age. Because in the end, that's what it had always been. Not a wife swap, a soul shake, a mirror, a second chance disguised as disaster.